I am Leah Vachani. I'm your host. I'm a holistic health and hormone coach, and I'm super excited for today's guest. So, Deanna Hansen, welcome, by the way.
You?
She, she is a pioneer in the field of fascia decompression for physical and emotional transformation. With more than 20 years of hands-on clinical experience, Deanna created Block Therapy, which I'm sure she'll talk to you about, a unique at-home fascia release protocol, which also you're going to have to define that for us too. And to relieve chronic pain and disease, encourage healthy detoxification, and reverse the aging process. Okay, I want all of that. I think everyone watching, every lady here is like, yes, please, please share more with us. Welcome, Deanna.
Thank you so much. And we'll make it really simple.
Yeah.
So first, how about I just dive in and I really talk to you about the world of fascia because I am so intimately connected in this world. I've spent over 60,000 hours working in the fascia system in people's bodies and my own. And I've really found a unique approach to unraveling the seams of time, rejuvenating cells and tissue, and really creating a different perspective on how we age, which of course we all want, because if we give the control over to gravity and give our power away to other people, then we don't have that same understanding of really the capacity that we have to go through time without accumulating age. So I want to talk a little bit about the fascia because this will bring, I think, a lot of clarity to what this system does and how it's really designed to support our cells. So we have trillions of cells in the body. And one of the functions of the fascia is to support proper cell alignment. So fascia is a combination of both collagen and elastin primarily, and the balance of the two proteins creates both stability, so we don't just simply turn into a puddle, but also mobility. So we have the ability to function, to move, to have all these wonderful ranges of motion, and to really thrive in life. So what happens though is under the force of gravity over time, we start to compress. And we're dominant on one side. So we don't just compress in a linear fashion. We literally spiral down in a forward rotational direction, one way or another, depending on whether we're right or left side dominant, as well as a whole bunch of other factors. So what happens to the balance of collagen and elastin is as we start tipping off balance, the collagen starts to migrate, because these are the building blocks to create the stability, the structure. So as the collagen starts to migrate though, now we get these areas of density in the body, these false walls and false floors. They act like scar tissue will, blocking blood and oxygen flow to cells, also blocking the body's ability to keep the cells clean. So over time, aging, as we know it, we typically get shorter and we get wider. We start developing chronic pains throughout the body. We might, end up with wrinkles on our face, saggy breasts, knee fat, what we think is knee fat, a bigger bloated belly. All of these things are typical things that we experience and expect with aging, yet they don't have to be if we can actually understand how to truly support the fascia system and provide what it needs to thrive in life.
Did you say knee fat?
Yeah.
Is that a thing that's new to me? I don't know what that is. Wait, are you talking about the saggy stuff that starts to form above your kneecap? And okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I do know what that is.
Well, and I mentioned it because of all of the YouTube videos that we have. That was one of the videos that continually went viral because so many people care about this, but it's not actually fat, it's displaced fascia.
Oh, okay. Now every woman watching is like, how do I fix it? I don't know if we're going to get to that later, but we can go there now or later. But I mean, okay, let's just be honest. Vanity gets us in the door a lot of the times. And then as we peel away the layers, we realize that, okay, this is actually a bigger thing that we should learn about and empower ourselves to advocate for our health. So most women watching here are either perimenopausal or menopausal, so over 40. And what I would like to know is, how does fascia play a role as we age over 40? And is it involved at all in like fatigue, anxiety, hot flashes, or any of the other symptoms we experience?
All of them. I actually just made my year, so I am now actively in menopause. I'm 54 years old. And
what? Yeah, I would never have guessed. You're doing something right. That's why we're here listening to you.
Yeah, and this whole journey began for me when I was in my 20s. I was training to be an athletic therapist. And At the time, I was really struggling with my own size and shape. I was doing the work that I was trained to do. I was dieting. I was working out like a fiend. I was working with elite athletes. I mean, I knew what it meant to have a fit body, yet all of the work that I was doing on my own body was not serving me. In fact, the harder I was working, the more compressed, the more congested, the more constipated, the more chronic pain I was accumulating. So this is me in my like mid 20s to the age of 30, where I was really putting in that time and effort, and yet my body was going in the opposite direction. So this was really challenging for me because I had a very asymmetrical face. I was really accumulating a ton of weight, 50 pounds overweight, primarily in my core. And so just nothing was working for me. So by the age of 30, I made some changes in my life. And as a result of those changes, I started having severe anxiety attacks. But it was this one attack in particular that was the seed of everything to come, because in the moment, I actually thought I was going to die. My breath was frozen in this panic state. So for some reason, I intuitively dove my hand into my abdomen. But this was where everything changed for me, because the first thing I encountered was pain. Now, I never touched this area of my body because I was ashamed of it. It was like, it was huge. It was horrible. I hated it. So now I'm diving my hand in. I encounter pain, but the pain takes me out of my anxiety attack. So I know I'm going to live another moment. So, but then what I started to do was intuitively explore with my hands in this tissue. Now, for 5 years up until that point as an athletic therapist, I always focused on deep tissue work. So I was very familiar with what scar tissue felt like in other people's bodies. But now here I am in my abdomen, and it feels like it's marbled with scar tissue, even though I hadn't had any injury or surgery. So suddenly I was like, wow, no wonder when I'm coming home from a 5-mile run dripping wet with sweat, my belly still feels cold. So for the first night, I was just working in this space. And what was most impactful for me was I felt calm, which was not my normal. So I wake up the next day, I have to go and work on patients all day. I was a little tender from where I worked, but I was still calm. So this was like really exciting for me. And I came home that second night. I'm like, I want to go back and see what else I can uncover. So I work again in the same way. And after that second night, when I stood up, I felt taller. And I went and I looked at myself in the mirror. My belly was flatter than it had looked in years. Years of excessive sit-ups, Taebo, running, aerobics, weights. I mean, you name it, I was doing it, and it was not taking me in the direction that I wanted. And literally in 2 days of doing this, I saw and felt a difference. So this became the work that I would do every day when I came home from working on my patients. I would work on my own body. And within 2 weeks, my chronic low back pain was going away. My neck pain was improving. My whole mood was changing because now I had some excitement in my life. I felt like I had some control finally. All those years of feeling like I was doing what I was taught to do and not going in the right direction, in a very short period of time, I started to see and feel these changes. So then I started flipping my patients onto their back, and I started doing the same thing in their bodies that I was doing on myself. And it wasn't long before I was attracting other therapists to learn the technique that I now call fluid isometrics. But most importantly, my passion and purpose was always to teach people to self-care. So that's where block therapy comes in. Block therapy is the self-care version of fluid isometrics. And I'm happy to dive in and talk all about that if you'd like.
Oh, yes, please. Let's just go there.
Okay, so basically fascia decompression is the science behind all of this. So as we get older, as we go through time, we compress, we get shorter and wider. So this work takes us in the opposite direction. It's putting the space back in the body that time has taken away. And there's 3 pillars. So the first pillar is creating space. So again, we get shorter and wider because of this migration of collagen, as it's designed to help keep us stable from falling flat on our face because we become off balance. It again creates those blockages to flow. So by moving in through the layers of fascia in the manner that we teach you with block therapy, we melt through the adhesions that are locking us out of alignment. And fascia will grip and adhere to bone with a force of 2,000 pounds per square inch. That's an incredible, powerful seal holding us out of alignment. And so we want to get all the way to the bone where the adhesions grip so that we can release that patterning of fascia. So that's the creating space, and it comes in combination with the second pillar, which in my view is really the point of all of this. It's inflating that space through proper diaphragmatic breathing. So I just want to talk a little bit about the diaphragm, because in my view, there's nothing more important to understand than how we breathe. So I'm just going to bring my camera down here for a moment. So the diaphragm is a plate of muscle that supports the rib cage. When we inhale, this plate of muscle moves down. When we exhale, it lifts. When it's working properly, there is this constant massaging going on with the organs, the heart, and the exhale is the counterforce to gravity because it lifts when we exhale fully. Now, the challenge is pain, fear, and stress cause us to reactively hold the breath. So if we become upper chest breathers, this foundation becomes weak and we start falling in. So as we fall in, one of the things is my belly is going to go outward because it has nowhere else to go. So here's why, as we get older, we feel that, why is it I haven't changed my exercise or my diet regime yet? I'm now getting a muffin top, or I'm getting bloating in my belly, or I'm getting digestive issues. It's because literally the weight of everything above the diaphragm comes crashing down into that core space, displacing the organs. But not only that, if we're breathing through the muscles of the upper chest, now we don't have that activity of the diaphragm moving up and down, creating that heating. So we become heavy and burdensome in space, but it also becomes cold from that lack of mechanical activity. So now here's our problem. We have compression and ballooning, but we also become toxic because now we're not able to break down and absorb nutrients. We're also not able to properly eliminate waste. So the waste starts to back up. We become toxic. We attract parasites and other things that create more waste. And then we start to expand, and it's not just in the belly, it's throughout the entire body. This can happen when we compress and balloon. So from the perspective of managing size and shape, I was instructed as a teenager when I was a dancer to hold my belly in, but all that did was it weakened my diaphragm, causing me to collapse into my core. So when here I am diving my hands into my belly and recognizing that I'm not breathing properly, this changed my understanding of why I wasn't getting the results that I should have been getting when I was reducing calories and working out like a fiend. So in 2 days, things started to change, and it was really rapid because I started to really bring in this diaphragmatic breath. And just a couple of more really important notes about proper diaphragmatic breathing. We can feed the body 6 times the oxygen when breathing this way. Now, people often say, well, how is that possible? We can't pull in 6 times the volume of air. It's not about pulling in more air. It's about directing it to where the majority of the oxygen receptor sites reside, which is at the base of the lungs. So if we're breathing through the upper chest muscles in a shallow way, we're not pulling the air deeply enough into the lungs for this absorption. But also, they proved that 84% of weight loss comes through proper exhalation. So if we're also not exhaling properly and fully, we're keeping this waste inside the body. And again, it's starting, we end up becoming bigger as a result and toxic. So connecting to this beautiful muscle is the key, but even just starting the process of breathing exercises isn't enough because of how the fascia will grip and hold the rib cage, blocking the ability for that diaphragm to function properly. So the combination of creating the space and inflating the space deal with that. So we can release those adhesions from the bone and move blood and oxygen into these newly created spaces. And then just like blowing up a balloon, the cells become nice and light and buoyant and they glow. Take half the air out of the balloon, it becomes a wrinkly rubber mess that can attract dust, dirt, and debris and becomes heavy. And then it pulls us down toward the earth. So those are the first 2 pillars. And then the third pillar is maintaining that space through understanding proper postural foundations. Because if we just go and fall back into those negative postural habits that took us there in the first place, we're going to wind back up into those grooves that we've created. So this 3-part process allows us to release the old patterning, move life into that newly created space, and then own that new space through teaching us how to use the body as it was really designed to be driven.
Wow. That sounds so simple. Is it that simple?
It is that simple. The first 2 are incredibly simple because we make it really simple through the teaching. The third one is the hardest part because we have habits of movement. So teaching people how to change their habits is really the hardest part. Like even just sitting here right now, if everybody sitting here can bring your attention to your sit bones, those 2 bones that we're resting on, Do we have equal weight on those bones, or is there more pressure on one or the other? So these are some basic things to become aware of, but we're like a building. So we want to support these proper postural foundations so that that collagen doesn't have to migrate to create the false walls and false floors that end up blocking blood and oxygen flow and increasing the aging process.
Wow. So you start with the breathing. And what happens after that? You mentioned that's a big part of the pillar, the foundations. Is there
So
more?
yeah, so basically the process of fascia decompression is we need to melt the adhesions. And this is why we use the tools that we do. So this is the Block Buddy, this is the Block Baby. We have two different sizes, but they're made of wood. They used to also be made of bamboo. And the reason they're made of this material is bamboo or wood and bone are similar in density. And because we want to drive through the layers of fascia and get to the root at the bone, we need something that's dense like bone. If we try to use something like a fascia roller that's made of plastic and is really porous, we're only going to stay on those surface layers. The difference between like taking a boat on the ocean or going deep sea diving, we need to go deep sea diving to release those layers of fascia. So, or those adhesions to melt them. And the thing is, it's a magnetic seal on the bone, that 2,000 pound per square inch seal. So what we do when we're in position and we work the entire body with this tool, we lie on it using body weight and gravity to create the pressure, and then teaching people how to navigate pain in a conscious way. We teach you how to very slowly twist and turn because we need to shear apart those layers as we focus on that breathing so that we can open, pump oxygen in, it lifts up, it lightens, the pain goes away. Then we teach you to follow the path of pain. We get to that next layer, we shear it, we open it, we pump blood and oxygen in, and we continue to go through the journey throughout the entire body. And it's incredibly efficient at melting through those adhesions on a very deep level very quickly. So the two are amazing at heating, and we stay a minimum of 3 minutes in each position so that we can actually melt. You can't rush melting. So 30 seconds in position won't be enough. And we actually have a free gift for people where they can start it right away using a rolled up towel. It's a 9-part series. People can get on that towel immediately, start the journey, and you're going to feel after that very first class, you're going to notice a lift of your rib cage. You'll notice a deeper breath, and you'll start to sense how profound this work and how simple it is.
I'm pretty excited to start that class myself.
Awesome.
So before we all run to our emails where the link is to get your free gift, let's talk a little bit more specifically about, women over 40, like peri and menopause. There's a lot of changes that happen in the body. And is this a time, like if we've never done any of this work before, is this a good time to start?
It's always a good time to start. Yeah. Really learning how to use your body the way it was designed to be driven.
Yeah.
If we'd been taught that from the get-go, the way we've experienced life and aging would be very different. So at any time you can start this work. I've had people over 100 years old start this work and see benefit. But this is definitely a time when women are frustrated because you're not sleeping. You probably have brain fog. You probably have aches and pains. Your body just, it feels like it's out of your control because these changes are happening. They can happen really fast. Yet when you start doing this process, what you give yourself is control. You give yourself control of how you age, of moving your body back. And no matter what tissue we're talking about, whether it's glands, muscles, fat, organ, nerve fibers, bone, fascia innervates all of it. So when we address fascia, we can address every single system and issue in the body because it's all connected to adhesion. So adhesion and scar tissue. So scar tissue created from injury or surgery, or adhesion created from incorrect posture over time, they act the same. They basically block that blood and oxygen flow and keep the system dirty. So we want to get rid of those adhesions and that scar tissue, again, to increase flow. As long as the body has optimal flow, there's no dis-ease, there's no pain, there's no challenge in sleeping, all of these things. It's when the body gets riddled with adhesion and scar tissue that we start to create inflammation. Now, inflammation is a really interesting topic because a lot of people think it's the problem. Inflammation is the response to
Mhm.
the adhesion in the scar tissue, but we need to know what to do with the inflammation. It's the gold. So if we address inflammation properly and put energy into the body, as opposed to like when you sprain your ankle, icing it, we don't want to do that. Then there's a very different understanding of inflammation. And we can actually, even if we're filled and riddled with chronic inflammation everywhere, we can turn on those healing proteins that were initially sent in the beginning of why that inflammation was sent and turn them on to their healing potential so that we can utilize that energy in the body that was put there in the first place to help us heal and regenerate.
Um, did you just say we should not ice our ankles when we sprain them?
Yes.
Oh my God. I actually was always wondering about like, isn't it's bringing in new blood, right? To heal. Correct me if I'm wrong, but as a nutritionist, I don't know much about the body, but it made sense for me with inflammation to bring in new blood, take away the whatever, the junk stuff. You could probably explain it a lot better, but so you're saying don't ice. What should we, okay, now I have to know what should we do?
So the second law of thermodynamics is nature abhors a gradient, which means when there's a gap in the system, nature's going to fill it in. So if we have a tear in a tendon, a muscle, if we have a break in the bone, that's all a gap. So the body's natural response to that gap is to direct blood flow, filled with all that is necessary to rebuild it. So if we stop that for the first 48 to 72 hours, we're missing that critical time of repair. And then what happens, because the body's still going to fill in that gap, all of the collagen and the surrounding tissue gets dumped in. But it's like filling a pothole. Like it's not making the. I live in Winnipeg, first of all, so we have awful potholes. It's springtime, and I mean it's just a nightmare to drive. And they go and they fill it in, and there's another rain, and then suddenly the hole's back because it's not being repaired properly. The body knows how to repair it. So if we assist the inflammation, then we actually rebuild that tissue properly. It's like if you have a bunch of, or if you have the raw ingredients for cake, you've got flour, sugar, butter, oil, whatever it is, you mix it up, you have batter. If you put batter in the freezer, you have frozen batter. If you put batter in the oven, you bake cake. So the body knows how to repair itself through the process, but we need to support that process and add energy, add breath, add heat through the extremities to that site of injury so that there's optimal flow. Because not only is there a need to fill that gap in, there's also like a car crash, there's debris. You know, whenever there's a break of something, there's damage, and we've got to pull that damage out of the way. So to stop it with ice, now you're freezing the damage, and now you're not allowing that blood flow to get in to rebuild. So the body takes over by dumping that collagen and creating scar tissue. But then that scar tissue has no elastability. So now that whole area, let's say it's your ankle joint, now your ankle joint isn't going to be articulating properly from that point going forward. That's going to change your gait. And then that's going to affect your body up the chain with every step that you take and impact how you age.
Wow, that is the most logical explanation I've ever heard about an injury. Thank you. I have
Oh.
another curious question that I'm pretty sure my audience, maybe they didn't pick up on it, but in the beginning, you mentioned you had an asymmetrical face. Was that relative to how your posture had changed or your fascia? Were you alluding to that? Because I noticed that a lot of women actually, as they age, complain about that. So is that related? I think I
Absolutely.
might have one too now.
Well, and we all do to some degree because again, we're dominant on one side. But when I was a kid, I used to have nosebleeds every single day, only on this side for like 45 minutes for years. So the amount of time I literally pushed my nose over, you know, that's one thing. But also my entire body was asymmetrical. I had sprained my ankles. I was a provincial volleyball player. So the rotation of always going one direction to another, like I created a very twisted, hard body. So if I'm twisted over here, which is causing my head to hang down over time. Now my entire shape of my skull is going to change. The way that the collagen is going to grip to the bone in order to try to stop the falling of my face toward the floor. I'm going to get the collagen migrating to the bony parts, but then I've got all this elastic tissue without the structure. So now I start getting a jowl. And then also the adhesions, the way they riddle, like maybe I get age spots because now the melanin is getting trapped, or maybe I have rosacea because, I don't have proper flow. So what we really need to do is we need to understand how to support proper cell alignment. As long as there's space, there's flow. As long as there's flow, there's health. It's when we have compromised flow from those adhesions getting created all around that we start to see signs of aging. We can also start to see the entire shape of your face. Typically, as we get older, the face becomes longer. It's not as broad. And that is also a function of how we use our tongue, how we chew. In fact, it was one of my community members a while back sent me an article about the shape of the skull from long before, there was convenience, like they're chewing on twigs and eating raw meat. They're having to really utilize their teeth, their tongue. They never had cavities. They never had crooked teeth. But now, because we drink our fruits and vegetables with smoothies, we're cooking our food so it's soft. So we've become very lazy in how we use our bodies, and that is having consequences in what's happening as we age. So it's pretty phenomenal, the changes that we can make in 21 days. I've got a ton of before and after pictures actually that show these differences, and they're fast. And even how your brain ages. We've got this container. This isn't like one solid helmet. Like there's 22 bones that are connected by ligaments, and they can migrate and they can move. So if I've been sitting like this for 20, 30, 40 years, and if you look at most people, they sit with a head tilt one way or the other, and it's too far forward, then we're going to start to get this migration. And because fascia is here to protect us, it grips and adheres along its path, creating cowlicks, creating eventually a lack of blood flow to the hair. So then we end up losing our hair, or it turns gray. Cellulite, it's grips of adhesion onto the bone as we start tipping from balance, because energy moves in waves and spirals. So the way the fascia winds and grips, it does it in that patterning, so we can undo that as well. Varicose veins, all of that stuff, it's all the same thing. And the process to undo all of this is also the same.
So I want to focus a little bit, pay some attention, because if I don't, all the women watching will be like, why didn't you ask that question? Is you kind of alluded to it with cellulite, but we all complain as we age about the stubborn fat usually in our bellies, our thighs, our, inner thighs especially. Is it fat? What's going on? I have a feeling you're going to tell me it's not. It has to do with the fascia.
Yeah, it's displaced fascia. So I think the easiest place to understand it is basically above that knee. So like that knee fat area where people will go and have liposuction. So if we are in correct alignment when we're standing, that's with our knees slightly bent. And if you slightly bend your knees, the quads automatically contract. There's a lifting, but there's also a floor for that tissue. If you look at, I would say, maybe 1 out of 1,000,000 people don't hyperextend their knees. So for everybody else that does, which is pretty much everybody, when we hyperextend the knee, now we've got this tissue, but we don't have a floor. So it starts to hang and it starts to sag. And because it starts to fall away, like everywhere else in the body, those adhesions grip to the bone, creating again that hardness. So now you've got all this tissue over here that doesn't have the collagen, and it doesn't have a floor to protect it. So now gravity's pulling it down. Same as breasts. When we are positioned properly, the rib cage is here to support our breast tissue. So, if I'm sitting properly, my muscles are supporting me. If I let this happen, then this happens, and eventually they're going to sag, but they don't have to if we can support correct alignment through understanding, how to support our posture.
That makes so much sense. Okay, so what do we do about it? Besides take your class, right?
Yeah, and it's really understanding how the body was meant to be used. So first of all, we were born to breathe diaphragmatically. But again, pain, fear, and stress cause us to reactively hold the breath. So we live in a stressful world. So if we're not conscious breathers, we're not. If we're not consciously breathing and focusing on that exhale and really making sure that that belly is working properly, when we inhale, the belly should become big. And this is a bit of a stretch. Again, when I was a teenager and I'm dancing, hold your belly in, hold your stomach in. It's not your stomach, but it's what people would say back then. Hold your stomach in. So if I'm holding that in, I have to breathe somewhere. I'm going to be breathing up here. So now I literally trained myself to not breathe properly because I was trying to have this small, tight belly. But now this weak diaphragm is collapsing into my core. So I can't hold that in anymore because now I've got this rib cage taking over that space. So that's, you know, just one huge thing that we need to do, but also understanding how the asymmetries create winding and tension in the body. So we're dominant on one side, but we should really be using both sides of the body equally, because if we continue to only use one side, we end up winding away from correct alignment, and then the body has to compensate. So whenever I'm looking at a body, I always look at what's going on in the foundation, because the fascia will grip and adhere to the calves and the feet the most strongly because they're the furthest from the engine. So if I have a frozen shoulder, if I have migraines, if I'm trying to lose weight, but I haven't changed the patterning of my calves and my feet, every time I start walking, I'm going to get pulled into that negative alignment. And when we look at the feet, if you look at yourself in a mirror, you're going to notice one foot likely splays away. It's pulled further away from midline. Often there will be a bigger bunion on that one side, and it will pronate. Now, these are generalizations. So as this leg is pulling away and it's like I've deflated that tire, the opposite side anchors because it doesn't want us to tip over. So we tend to have chronic pains on the opposite side to the driver. So if we don't look at what's going on in the foundation and correct that, then again, you can go for treatments for back pain, for shoulder issues, for all of those things, and really never get anywhere because what's driving this are the calves and the feet. Now I'm going to give everybody a little thing that they can do, and you'll be blown away at the changes very, very quickly. So between the toes, if you take your finger and you push down between each toe for 3 minutes, you can use a pencil. You want to feel it to the point where there's a little bit of pain. If you do this every single day for 3 weeks and take a before picture, because if this is all you do, you are going to be blown away at the changes. Blown away at the changes.
Oh, I love a good challenge.
Yeah, yeah. And it's simple to do, but again, you want to hold, you can't rush it, and you want to feel that pain.
So
So
12 minutes on each side, that's 24 minutes. You could do while you watch Netflix. That's easy.
it's so easy, and it will be so worth it, because this, we should have 60% of our body weight on our heels. Most people end up tipping forward and have a minimum of 80% on the balls of their feet. And then as a woman, if you put a high heel shoe on, now your entire body is compensating for that off balance forward alignment. And as soon as we start tipping forward, now gravity's playing havoc on us. It's winning the game of aging. We don't want it to. We want to be able to release that patterning from the feet, bring our center of gravity back to our heels so we stack ourselves properly. And then we can go through time with effortless effort. And it is truly the most impactful thing you can do besides connecting to your breath. If all you took from this is learn how to breathe through your belly and work the toes, in 3 weeks, you're going to be in a very different situation, whether you're dealing with menopause symptoms, whether you don't like how your body looks, how your brain functions, how your face looks. It's fascinating, the changes that can take place.
Wow, now I'm totally torn about whether I do the toe challenge for 3 weeks first before I start your 9-part
Do
series.
both of it. Do both and just
Yeah, do it all. A total transformation.
And yeah, and I mean, like that toe thing, as you said, like, you know, you do that watching TV. The other stuff is like, you know, 15, 20 minutes a day. And you'll just, again, you'll be truly blown away by the changes in your body.
That's amazing. It's so mind-boggling to me that some of this stuff, it seems so simple, you know, and no one's really talking about this. I mean, you are obviously, but most of us go to a doctor and they're, you know, dismissing a lot of our symptoms, or they're not giving us really concrete, and I'm talking about mainstream doctors. There's plenty of great doctors out there. But it feels like in, you know, typical primary care doesn't really know enough or have enough time to tell you these things. So I really appreciate you sharing that. You have something more to say?
Yeah, you know, yes, we are a container with parts, but we're also a fluid matrix where every single cell is interconnected to every other cell. And when we can start to look at the body from that perspective, appreciating the other one, but looking at it from this perspective, then everything changes. Because right now people are cold. Their bodies are more frozen than they should be. As we start to heat up our system, your diaphragm is like your body's furnace. The upper chest breath is like a space heater. So everybody's, driving their life through this little tiny, thing that's not as powerful as the diaphragm. Overall, we've become cold. And when we're cold, we're fragile. We can shatter, we can break. When we're fluid, we're so powerful. And the healing, the rejuvenation that can take place, we're healing fractures in days and weeks, not weeks and months. Like it's completely different. And it's very, very exciting because everybody has this accessible to them and it's free.
It's amazing. Do you have a social media account we can follow?
Yes, we're on everything, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, all of it, block therapy.
Block therapy.
On our YouTube channel, we have tons and tons of free video, diving even deeper into the work with the towel, also showing the use of the blocks, but also a lot of educational videos. My nephew's my partner in crime on this. He's 29 years old. It's lovely to have family who's a different generation than myself, also diving into this. And so we do podcasts every week as well. And there's tons of information in there.
Amazing. Well, I appreciate you so much coming here and sharing this, in my opinion, mind-blowing information. Is there any last words you wanted to share with the community?
Just start to look after your fascia, and honestly, your whole world will change. We also do one other thing, have a private Facebook community group, Block Therapy Community. I've got 15,000 members in there and I love this space. It is so incredibly supportive. Everyone is welcome. And if you ask a question, you're going to have people with your specific issues answering you. So it's not just Deanna talking. It's like people with MS, fibromyalgia that have handled chronic pain, that have changed the game for aging, all of this stuff. People will be sharing their experiences in there so you can hear from people that do the work.
Oh my God, I love it. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much.